because here we are. It's David McGillivray here again. I'm told, a comedy legend and horror icon, and this is Little Did You Know, the chat show. It's a show in which I talk to people I find interesting. Hope you agree. It's a major anniversary today. On the day we're recording this program, it's 1 year since Boris Johnson addressed the nation and said we've got to stay in our homes for 3 weeks. Well, I'm celebrating this, I can tell you. Okay, so this is Tanqueray Royale with blackcurrant. It's new to me. I don't know about you, but I can recommend it. My guest today, well, he's a writer and a theatre critic, and I want to talk to him because he's been able to attend theatre in between lockdowns, which is something I couldn't do. I also want to talk to him about the future of theatre after the pandemic has been sorted. Quite apart from that, he's writing the definitive biography of Stephen Sondheim. If that doesn't get you watching, I don't know what will. Please, will you say hello to the very wonderful David Benedict?
Thank you very much.
David, we've spoken briefly before this broadcast, and I was so impressed by the fact that you looked at my background and you said, what are those boxes with alphabet on them? And you were essentially able to define immediately that they were my theatre programs. How did you know that?
Well, mysteriously, my background that you can see at the moment is all books, but in the next room I have, well, my boxes are black, but they are exactly the same. They are those open files, and there's shelf after shelf of theatre programs from way back when I was first taken to the theatre by my grandmother. When I used to come up to London, she used to take the family to the theatre. It was a very generous thing she did, which I don't think I fully appreciated at the time. I look back now and think, taking a whole family to the theatre, probably even then was rather costly. Anyway, I ended up seeing all sorts of things, and I've always collected the programs and have done ever since.
It's so marvellous to be able to talk to a fellow theatre enthusiast. There's so much we can share over the next 45 minutes. David is a theatre historian. He studied at Hull University. He then was the artistic director of Gay Sweatshop. It was the first LGBT theatre company. Subsequently, he's written for the Indie and the Observer and Variety. I want to talk to you first, David, about something I didn't know. Okay, so let's face it, back in the day, I was, conflicted about my sexuality, but you were out and proud. You were working for Gay Sweatshop. People may not remember that company. Tell us more about it.
I heard about Gay Sweatshop when I was anything but out and proud. There was a review of something. It was probably their first season. It was about 1976 or 75. And I saw this, extraordinary sounding company, and I was a conflicted teen. There were no role models. There wasn't gay representation. It wasn't until 1987 that there were gay people regularly, routinely in soaps. So in the 70s, it was the dark ages. I heard about this company, and then I think it was the end of December 1980, something to me.
So, I mean, I'm not going to cut this out. It's an alert. I forgot to mute them. Okay, I'm doing it now. But forgive me. Please, David, I hope this won't continue again. Please continue.
I've forgotten where yes, in December 1984, I auditioned for Gay Sweatshop. They were putting on a play by Noel Gregg called Poppies that was set in 1939. And to my delight, I got the job. So I joined the company in 85, and then ended up about 3 years later as joint artistic director. It was an extraordinary time, and it really changed the way I thought. It sort of extended my political understanding of myself and the world. But yes, it was, even by that point, although there was gay work happening elsewhere by that point, we were the national, as it was called then, Lesbian and Gay Theatre Company, before acronyms were around to the same degree. And doing work touring the country and doing work to audiences who were really starved of representation. So we did the first British play about AIDS, and traveling around the country, basically bringing news to people as out lesbians and gay men. But this was unheard of. It was an extraordinary privilege to be able to do that, and it was really enlightening. And still to this day, I meet people who went, "Oh my God, you were with Gay Sweatshop." I remember seeing those, before I was out. It was really not. I was going to say revivifying, but that implies that they were reawakened. It was an awakening for a lot of people, and the fact that it was theatre, it wasn't about seeing people on a TV screen or in a cinema. It was live people who were identifying, who were out, that you could connect with, and were telling stories that spoke directly to an audience. And we would often play, I remember playing Shrewsbury. I can't remember the venue that we played, but there was nothing like anywhere where, pre-mobile phones, pre any kind of connection, where you would meet in odd places. It was before London really had a big gay scene, and the local sort of place where gay people collected was the vegetarian restaurant that was run by two gay men, and we would meet there and chat there and meet audiences. And the response to the work was really extraordinary, because people really valued it, because it was such a rarity. It was a great privilege to be part of that company.
We're going back a long way indeed. We're going back to the 1980s, when AIDS was basically terrifying, but Gay Sweatshop, of which you were the artistic director, produced the first play about AIDS. It was called Compromised Immunity. This is an extremely important play. What was the reaction?
Well, twofold. One was, I remember getting in the van to drive down to the first date on the tour, which was in Swansea, and hearing the news that the cleaners at the theatre had gone on strike because they felt that they would contract AIDS by cleaning the showers after us. And this story was picked up and covered in every single newspaper except The Guardian. And as you can imagine, the coverage was not positive in our direction at all. My favourite headline was in the Daily Star, who insisted on writing the headline, pansies go all of a doodah. Now, I think that whilst things are bad now in many ways, you wouldn't get a headline like that. The fact that it was utterly misrepresentative of the story is kind of neither here nor there. But although one laughs about it now, at the time, the idea that, you know, we were being vilified everywhere and that people were really scared of us was singularly unpleasant. But the reverse of that, of course, was that members of the audience there, I remember one woman talking to us about her late brother who'd committed suicide because of his self-loathing about being gay. And she was in tears saying if only he'd been able to see something like this, he would never have taken his own life. And, you know, people that work in theatre want to connect with audiences, and being able to connect at that level was profoundly important. And the company was formed in 1975 to promote an idea of lesbians and gay men that simply didn't exist. You know, when I was at school, my role models were, well, if you're going to be gay, then you're probably going to be like Frankie Howard or Kenneth Williams or something. And whilst as a man of my generation now, I look back on it and go, well, they were extraordinary individuals. At the time, that wasn't acceptable. And the alternative was a dirty old man in a raincoat, or so I thought, because those were the only role models that were available. There, as I said earlier, that, you know, there weren't characters on TV. There wasn't routine. You certainly wouldn't see gay teens in anything. There were intermittent appearances.
It's hard to think back to that time because it was so different. What inspired you to be out and proud at that period?
I think I felt like I came out very late. In fact, I came out at 19, and I look back at it now and think, well, actually, that's not too bad. You know, I knew that I was gay from about the age of 11. I didn't do anything about it for a long time. But once I'd come out, which was basically right at the end of my school days, it just felt right to me, and that I didn't want to lie. And it didn't feel like, I look back and think that was quite brave, but it certainly didn't feel brave at the time. It felt like the right thing to do. It was, I suppose it was a small p political stance. And the longer that went on, the more important it became because of the politics of the time, and then, of course, because of AIDS.
But we're talking about the 1980s. Was it difficult? Did you encounter outright animosity?
I personally feel I've been very lucky. I'm touching wood as I speak, but I have not been beaten up for being gay, although plenty of my friends were. I emerged from a very, very unhappy time at school, which was all to do with me wrestling with my sexuality. And I did incredibly well at school when I was young. And then once I began to wrestle with my sexuality, all my academic prowess vanished. And I went through pretty traumatic years. And I remember years later when Section 28, the Local Government Act, prohibiting homosexuality, as it were, on the rates, you know, with any kind of public funding behind it. One of Thatcher's great gifts to the nation. Thank you very much. I wrote a piece when the legislation was potentially being repealed, and I suggested to my mother that she didn't read it when it was published, but of course she went out and bought the paper, and it was the whole of the front page of the second section of the Independent. And And she burst into tears because I talked about how unhappy I had been as a teenager. And I think actually the reason that I was out publicly was I just thought I went through agonies and I don't want other people to suffer like that. And that's probably, thinking back, why it was important to me to work as an actor with Gay Sweatshop, because I thought, well, if I can do something to ameliorate the lot of the people that come after me, that's important.
Admirable. We're going to talk about that later, David. But right now, let's talk more about your role as an interviewer. You're not only interviewed, you have interviewed a lot of famous people. And we talked briefly about what I think is a very funny story. You interviewed John Hurt. What happened?
Oh, John Hurt, charming, lovely man, had done Beckett's play, Krapp's Last Tape, on film and in the theatre. It's a solo piece, a man wrestling with his memories. It lasts about 40 minutes, I think, something like that, maybe a little, I think it's 50 minutes. It's a terrific solo piece. And John Hurt, terrific stage actor, and it was immortalized on film. And there was a season of Beckett films at the Barbican. I was invited to interview him live on stage. We met beforehand to do a little preparation. When I interview, I like to do as little preparation with the interviewer as possible, because otherwise I find it goes, at the best, it goes stale. It's like if you go on a holiday and you come back and you've had a great holiday, and the first person you tell the story of, and then there was the night at the taverna, it's very, very good. By the time you've told the story the third time, it's a little tired and you've probably cut it down a bit and it's not so great. So I sat there with John Hurt in the green room, and he said, "What do you want to ask me?" I said, "Really, I don't want to rehearse this. Let's just keep it fresh." "No, no, what do you want to ask me?" And I said, "Well, I'd much rather ask you the things you don't want to talk about, and then I'll avoid them, and then you can relax. We're here to talk about you and Beckett. It's not a test of anything." And he went, "No, no, I want you to go through it." So we went through it and he told me lovely stories. And then it was time to go on stage, and we walked out on stage, nice full audience, sat there. I asked him the questions and he gave me 20-second versions of the lovely stories that he told me in the green room. And we got through all the material in about 15 minutes. So I was stuck there panicking, thinking, well, what a good thing I did my homework and did my research on the career of John Hurt. So we then did half an hour on the career of John Hurt. So yes, my tip to anybody ever doing an interview is do not over-rehearse.
Oh my goodness, it's true. And in this case, okay, we haven't rehearsed this, I
No?
promise you. Um, David just told me briefly about that John Hurt story, and it was a warning. Okay, so none of this is rehearsed. I'm going to throw this at you straight away, David. Something tells me your major icon, I don't know where I get this from, is Doris Day.
Well, she's one of my icons. I remember being in New York and getting very excited in a bookstore somewhere in Chelsea because they had a T-shirt which I wore for years and years and years, which had a picture of Doris Day in the pajama game, on which was inscribed the legend, "Have a Doris Day." And I did have a Doris Day for many days. Yes, I do. I do admire Doris Day. I curated a season of her films at the BFI. Oh gosh, I can't remember how long ago it was. Probably about 8 years ago, something like that. Which I cheekily entitled Resurrection Day, because I do think that she is underrated. I think that Doris Day's problem was that she did a lot of nonsense. Because it was a long time ago and I haven't prepared this, I can't remember the precise facts, but she did something like 18 films at Warner's when she was signed by them. She was so uninterested in acting. She'd been a band singer and a very, very successful one. She was so uninterested that she fell asleep in makeup prior to her screen test. And but she got the screen test. She made a picture, Romance on the High Seas, and then made 17 more in, I can't remember now how many years, but not that many. There was, it was a sausage machine. She was turning out films. She had no control. These days, actors produce or choose their scripts. She didn't.
But I'm sorry, David, I have to press you. Why is Doris Day a gay icon?
Why is she a gay icon? Because I think she, although you look at her films now and think of her very much as very feminine. She wore beautifully cut clothes. She has immaculate hair. The joke was Groucho Marx, I knew Doris Day before she was a virgin. There was this image, but I think she's a feminist icon because she did things on her own terms. In film after film, she gets her own way. She may end up with the guy in a very heterosexual way, but she won't succumb to his advances because she's got her pride and she's got what she wants to do. She's often in films like Pillow Talk, she's got a career and she has no interest in throwing that away in order to become a wife. There's a very good film with James Garner, The Thrill of It All, in 1963, where she has a career and it's all about the battling between the two of them. Garner was incredibly impressed by her technique, as indeed was Hitchcock, for whom she made The Man Who Knew Too Much.
It's all true. Well, we'll leave aside a Calamity Jane, in which she was very butch. We'll leave that for another conversation. I'm going to move on. David, who were the most beautiful people on the planet in 1951?
That would be Elizabeth Taylor and Montgomery Clift in A Place in the Sun. I watched that on the big screen, and if you never have, and cinemas come back after the pandemic, and it's ever shown, make sure you go and see it. It's George Stevens' 1951 film of a novel by an American tragedy by Theodore Dreiser, and at that point, Montgomery Clift and Elizabeth Taylor, who play, as it were, star-crossed lovers. He's already going out with poor Shelley Winters, who comes, not giving too much away, but to a sticky end, and they are in love. I took the conductor John Wilson to the cinema to see it. We went to the BFI because we were working together on one of his proms of film music, and I said, if you don't include the score to A Place in the Sun, I'm not doing this gig, because Franz Waxman's score of it is unbelievably lush. If Rachmaninoff had lived to write movie scores, it would have been like that. It's an amazing film in beautiful, beautiful black and white, and there are two shots where Clift and Taylor are gazing at each other on the screen, and as you said, introducing this, you think there were no two more beautiful people on the planet.
It's absolutely true. Have a look at that film. David, we're going to take a brief break now because we always like to remind ourselves of what Peccadillo Pictures are doing. So please have a look at this trailer. It's for Canary. Join us again in just a couple of minutes.
Jeg vil have en postmand med sig. Jou oproepinstruksies het gekom.
Die aanbieding sit nie gemaklik met enigiemand van ons nie, maar as hy ten minste by die Kanaries kan inkom, dan sit net 'n paar tree terug in steede van reguit hel toe.
Nasionale diensplig is 'n voorreg. Die volgende 2 jaar gaan ons saam werk, woon, eet, sweet, ontspan en aanbid. Julle wat hier sit, is ons uitverkorenes. Die Kanaries van 1985.
'n Kanarie, Johan, niemand ek hoor.
Kanaries! Oh, dag!
Hou jy van musiek?
Ja, baie.
Almal sê julle is 'n koor uit die hemel uit. 'n engelekoor.
Liefdom se trots. Maar die pad het julle moffies. En, jy meisie?
Sodra jy koutjie oop staan, dan vlieg jy hier weg.
Want dit gaan al weer oor jou. Jy mos altyd die victim.
Ek weet nie wat jy volgende gaan wil sê nie, maar ek wil dit nie hoor nie.
Ons moet die oorlog tot aan die einde toe veg. Want hoe nader aan die einde, hoe feller sal die totale aanslag van die duiwel word.
Kom sê dit nie voor.
Wat ons doen is onwettig, Wolfgang. Ons kan tronk toe gaan.
Ons sing in 'n koor, maar ons het nie 'n stem nie.
That's Canary. It's a Peccadillo release. Check it out. I'm David McGillivray. I'm here with my special guest, David Benedict, and we're talking about all kinds of stuff at the moment. I want to know more, however. Can you talk me through, David, a program I've researched? It was on BBC Two, and the title is To Be or Not to Be Out.
Gosh, that is going back. Now, I'm trying to remember when that was. I think that was at the beginning of the 90s, and it must have been about 91. There was a night of lesbian and gay television on BBC Two. I can't begin to tell you how seismic this was. It seems so unlikely now, but Channel 4, which started in the early 80s, had a revolutionary series called Out on Tuesday, which was an hour-long series of documentaries. Some of them are around on YouTube, and I urge anyone interested in lesbian and gay history to go and look for them. It was a magazine slot. It had short films, it had long films, it had all sorts of things. And the BBC had nothing like it, but Out on Tuesday really introduced filmmakers like Richard Kwiatkowski. All sorts of people made their debuts there, and it was watched by a lot of people. And BBC Two finally followed up. I cannot now remember the name of the production company, but there were people from the production company of Out on Tuesday who ended up making this Saturday Night Out, as it was called, which was the night of lesbian and gay programming on the BBC. It was shocking news. There, and you can find this on YouTube. It started with a totally brilliant program that was put together by the late Shona Brown, a wonderful woman, called The Gay Rock and Roll Years. The Rock and Roll Years was a series, as I recall, that the BBC ran, where they would show you, I can't remember if it was a year or several years, but they would show you a span which had documentary footage of the day and the hits that were being played in what was then called the hit parade of the time. The Gay Rock and Roll Years spun from that. So it was a history of LGBTQ lives from 1955 to 1991. And the first chunk of it is on YouTube. And I watched it, about a year ago. It's brilliant. I had nothing to do with that segment, but it is absolutely brilliant. And it shows you early documentaries about homosexuals and early scenes of women at Gateways Club and bits of film footage from the day, bits of actual films. It's all sorts of things, beautifully ironically cut to things like Guy Mitchell singing "The finger of suspicion points at you."
You must watch it, honestly. And not only that, but you presented something. It's my favourite title, probably of all time, at BFI Southbank, Oklahomo.
Yes, I'm very proud of that title. Yes, it was part of what's now BFI Flair, but was then called the London Lesbian and Gay Film Festival. And I was asked if I wanted to do a presentation of some kind, and I did lesbians and gays and why we love musicals. So it seemed very good, very logical for me to call it Oklahomo.
Oh, David, I met you a few years ago, and you revealed that you were writing the definitive biography of Stephen Sondheim. Oh, but wait a minute. Okay, that was 2014. The first draft was expected in 2017. Okay, what's going on?
What's going on? I'm late. I think everyone that's ever written a great big fat biography is late. Who knows when it will be finished? But it's still being done. I was working on it this afternoon when this interview was set up. Yes, it will eventually be published by Random House in the US and by Picador in the UK, and Sondheim is right behind it and has given me access to everything and everyone who is still with us, which of course he is. He was 91 on March the 22nd.
My goodness, have you met him?
Many times. It was quite odd the way this happened. I interviewed him for the Times magazine in 2000, so a long time ago now, 21 years ago, when Michael Grandage was doing a production of Merrily We Roll Along. And the Times magazine sent me to meet him. And I was terrified and utterly intimidated, but we got on very well. And I'm not going to tell you what it was, but I asked him something and made an observation that he had never thought of before. And he stared at me and said, "Yes, and I've never thought of that before. And you will have to wait until the book comes out to find out what that is," he said tantalizingly. But the point, what I didn't realize then and realize now, is that he has been interviewed hundreds, probably thousands of times. He made his name in 1957 when his first little show on Broadway, West Side Story, happened, and has been interviewed ever since. Most people that interview him ask him a lot of obvious questions, and I asked him a lot of obvious questions, but I also put two and two together as we were speaking and had a good thought, which he appreciated. So since then, we became I wouldn't say we were friends, we became friendly, and that eventually led to the book.
Well, okay, but as always, I have to play devil's advocate. Some people don't get Sondheim. I mean, wait a minute. He's only had 2 hits. What is it about him?
I think it depends on what you want from theatre. If musicals used to be entertainments for bored businessmen, they had characters with balloons for brains, they had merry tunes and skits, and leggy showgirls. Then in 1943, Oscar Hammerstein and Richard Rodgers wrote Oklahoma, which was a musical play. That changed everything because it was a massive hit and made them incredibly wealthy, and therefore every other writing team went, ooh, I'd like a slice of that. So musicals then became not more serious, but more linked and interwoven. And instead of having songs that you could take out and put another one in and just bring on a bunch of chorus girls and nobody cared, if you watch Busby Berkeley movies from the 30s, it's quite clear what musicals were like, and they were empty-headed at best. Rodgers and Hammerstein come along and go, no, it's not empty-headed. We're going to write a song play where characters determine action. There's a real plot. Now, lots of musicals are still flimsy and frilly and silly. And if that's what you want from the theatre, that's completely fine. But that's not what Sondheim is writing.
Okay, so it's the big question. The book's been delayed. When can we expect it now?
I am not going to be tied to that. I'm not going to be tied to that. It's not imminent.
Oh my goodness.
I'm sorry. No, it hasn't been, it's just been delayed. It's a very, very long life. And as I say, he's 91. He's been famous since 1957. So what's that? 66 years worth of really first-rate work. There are a lot of people to talk to. There's a lot of writing to be done.
It's a work in progress. But we're on the subject of theatre now. Now, you were one of the few. I wasn't one of them. You went to theatre during lockdowns. You have been reported as saying you felt safe there. Why?
I was lucky enough, because I was reviewing, to see various shows. I saw 2 or 3 shows at the London's Bridge Theatre. I saw a show at the Almeida, and I saw a show at Southwark Playhouse. And at all of those venues, the social distancing was handled in an immaculate fashion. And also theatre audiences are used to sitting quietly and being ushered to their seats. And whilst, some audiences are rowdier than others, they are used to going, walking in single file down aisles. So actually, at somewhere like Southwark Playhouse, where, so you were greeted, it was all explained to you how it would all work. We were masked throughout. And at Southwark Playhouse, the seats had perspex screens between the seats. So it was like sitting in a little booth, but you were perfectly able to see out to the front. And you didn't feel like, oh, well, the person next to me is breathing on me, because they weren't, because you were screened. So it absolutely felt like you were being individually looked after and made to feel safe. In all of the theatre performances that happened out of lockdown in this last year, where everyone has done track and trace, there hasn't been a single reported case of anyone contracting the virus as a result of being there. I have felt less safe in supermarkets than I have felt in the theatres.
So this implies that when theatre returns in the summer, it's going to be as safe as possible.
Yes, I mean, I think that no theatre producer worth his or her salt is going to mount something that is a danger to their audience. At a simple level, I'm sure people would sue if they went somewhere and felt that they were very, very unsafe. In the days of social media, it would not take very long for there to be, quite rightly, uproar at unsafe practices. So, I mean, how it will work, I'm not sure, because we don't yet know how much social distancing will have to take place. The argument, it seems to me, is that if the vast majority of the vulnerable have been vaccinated, then even if the viral rate goes up amid the public, people are less likely to get sick, and therefore it's perfectly possible to gather in large numbers in auditoria. But theatre doesn't, if you show a movie to 5 people, that's not great in terms of atmosphere, but actually you're in the dark. It's fine. It doesn't make any difference. Theatre, you want to be in a crowd of people. You don't want to be in a very scattered auditorium. And crucially, you cannot make it work financially. A play, and certainly a musical, has to have something in the region of 70% business, 70% capacity, before you can break even, let alone make a profit for those putting the thing on. Therefore, it's very complicated as to trying to come up with a mathematical system to make it work.
It's absolutely true. But you have written, David, about something else, and that is gathering at stage doors. Now, it's an institution. I mean, there are crowds of people outside stage doors, particularly on first nights. They want to meet the stars, they want autographs. You've implied that this may never happen again. Is that true?
I didn't quite write it as definitively as that, but I do think there is a question mark over it. I mean, I when I was younger, I would go to stage doors and get autographs. And I used to go backstage and see a friend of mine, the late actor Gillian Hanna, who was in The Cripple of Inishmaan, which a Martin McDonagh play that played at the Noel Coward Theatre on St Martin's Lane. That production was headed by Daniel Radcliffe of Harry Potter fame. And Gillian and I would leave the theatre, and of course she'd be signing autographs and I'd be keeping my head down as a nobody. But then Daniel would come out, and there would be, every night there was an enormous crowd of people all waiting for him to sign their programme, and all breathing into his face and wanting selfies to stand right next to him. I think that may well not be happening for all the obvious reasons. On the other hand, ultimately, let's be positive. Ultimately, the chances are there will be, it will become like flu. Flu is around in the general population. It's very fatal to some people, which is why the vulnerable get a flu vaccine every year. However, everybody else takes a calculated risk that they might get flu and they might be a bit ill, and then they'll get back to health again. So it's possible that social interactions of all sorts of kinds, including stage door autograph signing, may slowly come back. But I would think at the beginning, it'll be a bit gingerish. I don't think that people are going to be terribly willing to stand in huddled masses.
Yes, I think we are maybe moving into another era. David, we're moving towards the end of this discussion. Yes, it's true, but only here on YouTube. I'm going to mention just one more thing before we end, and that is the fact that on the day we're recording this, it's Barry Cryer's birthday. I know you're a fan. I am too. I mention Barry quite often on this show. Can you share anything in particular about the great Baz?
I can't. I just admire him enormously. He is still going strong. He is brilliantly funny. I'm an addict of I'm sorry I haven't a clue, but he's just, you know, if you go back through the history of comedy, notably, well, I would say in this country, but particularly at the BBC, he's been everywhere and done everything and is still funny. He's not, well, we'll have him on because he used to be funny when he was young. No, Barry Cryer is still the business. And, you know, that's a marvelous thing. And, you know, he hasn't succumbed to illness of any major kind that anybody knows about. Thank goodness for that. Long may he thrive.
Oh, it's absolutely true. I can reveal now exclusively Barry is going to be on the show. And the reason I know you're a fan of Barry's is that I'm following your Twitter feed. David, I love the name. It's Eggs Benedict.
Yes. that came very late, actually, because when I worked at the Independent, there was a young journalist there called Vicky Ward, who was quite posh, and she said, as only Vicky could, "Oh, did everyone at school call you Eggs?" I said, actually, no, because Benedict is my stage name. So I was never called Benedict until I was a grown-up. But I thought, actually, Eggs Benedict it's quite a fun name. And then when I needed a Twitter handle, it seemed like a good one.
I love it. Oh, David, I want to talk to you about so much more. Can we continue this conversation on Patreon?
By all means.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. It's going to get much more personal. Lovies, if you're a Patreon subscriber, you can join us right now. We're waiting for you. If you're not, consider subscribing. There's the link right underneath me. We're going to be talking about much more personal stuff. I'll go into no further detail. But for now, David, thank you so much for joining us today on YouTube. I've loved every minute.
And so have I. Thank you very much.
Lovies, it's been absolutely marvellous. David, thank you very much indeed. This is David McGillivray asking you please to join me next week here on YouTube. My guest will be Andrew Baker. 35 years ago, he was the victim of a most appalling hate crime in the days when that wasn't even a term. He's never talked about what he experienced 35 years ago. Please join me then. But until now, this is David McGillivray saying thank you so much. Bye.